Here with you all, and I am going to share my slides so we can get started. Okay, so hopefully you can see that all right. And before we get started with content, if you all can please take a quick moment to change your Zoom name to include your organization that you're in so that I know where you all are coming from, as well as so you all know where you all are coming from. And there are instructions on the slide on how to do that. And so I'll just take a few seconds for you all to do that and we will jump in. Okay, thank you all for changing your organizations. For those of you who are joining now, we are taking a moment to change your Zoom name to add your organization. The instructions are on the slide. All right. Hello, hello. There's still some people trickling in, so I'll say it one more time. We're just taking a second to change our Zoom name to add the organization, and then we'll jump into the content. All right, thank you all. Okay, so if you're still working on that, feel free to keep working on that, and we will get started with today's content. So here is our agenda for today. So for webinar 7, as I mentioned, we're focusing on psychosocial assessments as a way to really get to know the members that you are working with and really getting to know them better. So we'll start with an icebreaker as usual. We'll kind of go over some of the feedback that you all shared from the online trainings. And then we'll go and dive into the purpose of the psychosocial assessment, the different components, and answer any of the questions that you have about those different components. We'll take a short break in the middle of all of that, and then we will finish off with tips for the psychosocial assessment, engaging with members, a case example where you all can practice introducing the psychosocial assessment and using it. And then finally, we'll end with a meditation to kind of wrap things up nicely. All right. So as the agenda says, we will start with a short icebreaker. So this one is going to be about joy. So you all will be put into small breakout rooms where you have the opportunity to share your name, your role, your organization, and then a recent experience anytime in the near or distant past where you experienced or something that brought you joy. It could even be today, it could be at some point in this day that you can share. Any questions about the icebreaker before you all go into your breakout rooms? Okay, well, then you should get a notification shortly to join a breakout room, and then we'll join back in just about 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Hi, everyone. For those just joining us now, I'm going to wait for them to connect to audio. Okay, so you will be asked to get into a breakout room shortly to share your name, organization, role, and a recent experience that brought you joy. And then we'll kind of come back as a larger team. So you should receive that notification to join a breakout room.
I'm the director of Groundhood Jobs Plus, Jonathan. Pleasure. I just was hoping I could stay on and listen to some things as I'm doing other things while my mental health team is on here. Because I know you guys were talking about the psychosocials potentially with this, and it was just something that I wanted to hear behind the scenes. So if you don't mind, am I able to just stay and kind of listen and not so much be in the breakout rooms. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Alessandra, does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that's okay, Jonathan.
I appreciate it. Just I had some questions, and if it wasn't answered, that's when I would like chime in a little later if I was able to stay on. So
Yeah, of course. Great meeting
awesome.
you. Mhm.
Yes, pleasure. Thank you guys.
All right, Alessandra, we can maybe bring people in back in like 2-ish minutes at 2:09.
Okay.
Okay, Alessandra, I think you can bring everyone else back. People are joining back. All right, welcome back, everyone. So just a quick minute for everyone else to join back. Welcome back. So just waiting for everyone else to join back in the main breakout room, in the main room. So we'll just give it like a few more seconds. All right. So I'd love to hear just a quickly if anyone from anyone's group would love to share something that you all shared about, something that brought you joy recently. Is there anything that kind of stood out to you, or anything that you'd like to share with the large group?
I would say we had Randall mentioned two placements, and Frederica mentioned a group that she did that she didn't feel so great about, but it turned out that the um, the meeting had great results. So sometimes we don't see the fruit that we bear, but yet we fed a family unbeknownst to ourselves. So that was a good meeting.
Is amazing. Yes, definitely joy can be planned or unexpected, can come out of nowhere. So thank you so much for sharing, Chandrea. Anyone else, maybe one other person who'd love to share just kind of something that brought them joy or someone or something that someone in their group shared?
Okay, I'll share. Hey everyone, my name is Corinthia, the Assistant Director, Bronx Restaurants Plus. The one thing that brought me joy is one day when I was walking down the street, one of my members had came up to me, and before I became the Assistant Director, I was the Employment Coordinator, and he thanked me for helping him get a porter position because he is now a porter in the shelter that he used to live in. So he was extremely excited about that.
That is amazing. Thank you
Let's
so
heard
much for
this.
sharing that and for sharing that with all of us because that brought me a little bit of joy as well. Thank you. All right. Well, we can move along to our webinar today. So before we dive into kind of more of the psychosocial assessment, this is a little information on what you all shared about what you found most interesting from the online trainings. So 4.1 and 4.5 Moodle trainings. So learning about the mental health task sharing model, the minority stress model and how that plays out, and also learning about the various steps taken before referring members to clinical services, so all the steps that you all are also participating in. And then lastly, some learning different engagement strategies for the psychosocial assessment. So how to engage better with members and how to feel more comfortable doing this with your members. Some things that you all shared that you'd love to hear more about regarding 4.1 and 4.5 is different innovative approaches to mental health task sharing, so including case studies or case examples and some of the challenges that were encountered and maybe how to navigate some of those challenges. Also wanting to learn more about concerns and barriers with the community care model and task sharing. So feeling a little unclear about roles and tasks for especially our non-mental health staff that are doing this work. And then lastly, learning more about some motivational interviewing and client-centered approaches and when working with members. So we've taken some of this feedback and have incorporated throughout this webinar. And I'll also kind of keep this in mind as we have some of our discussions for today so that you all feel equipped with additional kind of strategies that can answer some of these concerns when using the psychosocial assessments and with just everyday implementation and working with members. All right. So we'll first dive into just a quick review of the purpose of the psychosocial assessment, this component, and why it's important to conduct this. So as a reminder, this comes somewhere in the middle in the process model. So after you've kind of engaged with someone, you have done the screening and are working on this step around assessment. And the psychosocial assessment comes before the psychoeducation, the stress management counseling, and any referral. So this is kind of still where you're not really familiar with the person that you're working with just yet. So that's the purpose of the psychosocial assessment. So as a reminder, you all have access on Moodle to your implementation forms. More specifically, the one that we're diving into more today is the psychosocial intake form, which can be found on Moodle, and that's this section here. And this is what it looks like. If you haven't looked at it already, this is the psychosocial assessment, what you see on the right here. So it's a few pages long, and the main purpose is that it provides you all a very structured way and almost like a guide to get to know your members so you're better able to understand and support their needs. Because it's really hard to help people, right, if we don't know what their individual needs are or their individual situations. And so this is a guide to help you inform some of those next steps. So the assessment focuses on both psychological factors, so including mental health history, stressors, how people cope with them, because individuals cope differently, individual strengths and challenges. It also asks about social factors such as education level, employment, living situation, and culture. So there are 5 parts to this guide or this psychosocial intake, which are listed here. They include personal information, protective factors, stressors, mental health history, and the development of a service plan summary to address needs and kind of ongoing goals that they identify. I also really want to emphasize that although there's this like proper form, you all are probably already doing a lot of this work already and kind of asking some of these questions already. So the guide is meant, you can still kind of have your style when you're implementing it or asking, but this just kind of allows you other opportunities and other questions that you might want to ask that could be helpful. So really getting familiar with this guide to see what other questions and things might be helpful to ask. And so we'll go through these different components and we'll kind of talk about what feels good about asking people or members these questions, what feels what feels like maybe less comfortable, and we can kind of talk through strategies on how to go about those conversations and how to engage with members. And then if you, in the chat, I also want to point out that Alessandra, a member of my team, also just put in the form if you are interested in following along with me, or if you haven't looked at the form, taking a look at what the structure looks like. And again, this is the psychosocial intake portion that we're going to go through today. So that is in the chat. All right, so the reason why we ask all these different questions and components on the psychosocial form is because it really supports with building relationships with individuals. And when you have a really strong relationship with someone, it's easier for maybe them to trust you and for them to kind of hear and listen to you about the recommendations that you're making or any advice that you're giving. So it really provides an opportunity, first and foremost, to build a relationship with that person that you're working with. It also asks about different strengths and needs. So of course we want to support people on their needs and anything that they would like help with, but asking about strengths is just as important because this can really help you kind of remind them sometimes of the strengths that can help them overcome some of their needs and challenges, or reminding them of the different strengths and tools and strategies that they already have too. So asking about them is also just as important as asking about their needs. I wanted to highlight this again because this was mentioned in the online trainings. But there was a study that found that most people, just average people, thought that it was really important for even healthcare providers to ask about social aspects. So maybe some questions that you think, maybe I shouldn't really ask some of these things. A lot of individuals do find that when healthcare providers or professionals ask about these social aspects about their life, such as housing or food insecurity, they don't necessarily want solutions and answers to all these things, but even just asking about them really goes a long way, and being aware of these things really builds a connection with individuals. So that just keeping that in mind as you kind of experience some of that discomfort with asking some of these questions. And of course, you will maybe have individuals who may not want to answer questions, and that's totally okay too. And we'll talk through some of those instances as well. And with strengths, the healthcare field as a whole is really deficit based, kind of like what's wrong, what's going on. And so we really want to make sure that this psychosocial assessment form also provides opportunities for strengths, and highlighting those and reminding them about those strengths with your work together. And then lastly, we're fortunate that we have resources and opportunities to try to connect members with resources. And so this psychosocial form, asking about needs and asking about tools, and allows you to have a more informed decision about what to do next and kind of the next steps. So while we are engaging with members and going through the psychosocial form, and throughout your relationship with them, we want to keep in mind the different types of psychological and social factors that can challenge, that can be challenging for them, but can also maybe promote resilience. So as you know from your work and the work that you've all done already, there are sometimes hidden or additional challenges that members face. So the members that you serve may also be facing. So building a relationship with them and increasing access to basic needs are ways that we can support them better, and support the resilience throughout the psychosocial assessment. So these factors were more, discussed in modules 1.1 and 4.1. So I won't go into depth here, but this is just a reminder of some of the reasons why we ask about these questions in the work that you all are doing. So before going into our tips and our recommendations, I'd love to hear from you all kind of what are some challenges that you've seen already or challenges that you anticipate with conducting the psychosocial assessment with members or asking some of these questions? What are some challenges that are coming up? And feel free to unmute and chime in, or if you want, putting it in the chat, whatever feels best.
Hi. I think a couple of challenges that I anticipate. I have not started using it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically three. One, some of the information, at least on the first two parts of the form,
Mm-hmm.
are already requested in other intake documents that we use in the program. So it's going to, sometimes it feels redundant. And then number two, in terms of that redundancy, recognizing that we do very short-term counseling at our program and refer out for people who are doing the deeper dive. They then sit with someone to go through a more complex psychosocial assessment document. And so for many of the clients that I have worked with over the years, this process of redundancy and repeating information for them is a barrier to treatment. They find it unfriendly. And they complain about having to constantly say the same thing over and
Over and
over in
over.
multiple places. So I just wanted to share that. Maybe you have some suggestions about how we can make it feel less overwhelming in terms of a bureaucratic process.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Federica. And I definitely have some suggestions, but I'd love to hear if anyone else also is experiencing that or anything else they'd like to add. I kind of heard someone unmute, so I'm not I just wanted to open up the floor briefly.
This is Janelle. I'd like to totally agree with Frederica. It brings down the morale and their, even anticipation of what they're coming here for. Um, it can also seem like we're disorganized and don't have a handle on what we're doing, when you're asking the same questions over and over.
Yeah.
Which kind of diminishes their trust in our abilities.
Absolutely, yes. So I definitely agree that these are types of questions that, people may have to answer a lot of times, and it can be frustrating. It may seem like, well, these people don't care about me if they don't know that I've already answered them. So I definitely hear that. And as I mentioned earlier, right, some of you are already asking these questions, already have some of this information. Some of you don't, and that's okay too. But if you do have a lot of this information, that's actually even great. You don't have to ask them these things. You can fill them out. If you're not sure, you can confirm with them. But it's meant to be a collaborative process with them, because you also don't want to assume you have this information, right? But if you definitely are sure that you do, you can confirm with them. You can fill it out ahead of time, the parts that you do know. You don't have, even though I mentioned earlier, it's a structured way. It's a flexibly structured way where if you're someone that needs a little more structure to ask, or maybe you've never met this person before, or have asked some of these questions, it provides that guide. But if you have that information, you can be a little more flexible with it and just ask the portions that you don't know if there's sections on there that you don't already know. This isn't meant to reconstruct entirely the way that you are already doing things. It's just kind of recommendations for other questions you can ask. Does that help or answer some of the concerns with the redundancy and the kind of the monotonous kind of way it can be? Or any other things that others would like to add or contribute?
I I agree with a lot of the sentiments and just in my experience with the psychosocial in the same way that we kind of discussed with the PHQ-9s, it's almost helpful to, it's just like a conversation that I think is best helpful once like there's a little bit of rapport with the member. It's actually like almost better for me when I know some of the answers to the questions versus someone who's like totally new and then you have to kind of like dive through the whole thing. If it is someone that you've maybe talked with before about some of the um like areas of the psychosocial, I always find it helpful to just like confront it right then and there. Like, I may have talked with you about this already, but like, you know, we talked about your social supports in the past. I just want to like double check, you know, is are things still going well with like your family or your church group, things like that. And really just making it like almost as yeah just conversational as possible because there you're right, everyone's right in that like it can get really monotonous and can get very clinical feeling and you know that's never what I wanted to feel like on the other side of the chair. So just keeping that in mind too. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. And yeah, we'll definitely spend some time today on, you know, setting the stage and how we introduce it, right? We don't want it to be like, here's a form that we're going to fill out together and, you know, we're just going to jump in, right? We want to express, you know, we want them to really want to fill this out too. We want to express the purpose of this. And so really setting the stage for that collaborative process and that conversation is something that we'll talk a little bit more about. Thank you all. Are there any other challenges that we haven't talked about already that you have experienced or anticipate? Okay. So you all have mentioned some of these already, but you know, it can feel monotonous. It can feel um, redundant, very clinical, right? It can be also lengthy. There's a lot of sections if you're looking at the form, right? So some tips for that definitely not having to go through it from start to finish, just maybe the sections that you're maybe don't have information on. It can also, you may encounter individuals, you know, some people might know that, yeah, you know, I answer these questions all the time, here you go. But there might be others where you might encounter some more resistance or reluctance on why are you asking me this? Or I don't see the reason why I should, you know, provide this information. There's also, it is a lot of sensitive information and there's varying levels of what you might encounter. And so how to navigate when information like that is shared with you can also be something challenging with these types of forms. And we'll talk through these throughout the webinar today. All right. We may have already talked about this, but if anyone wanted to chime in quickly on, you know, what are some of the benefits that you've seen by conducting this psychosocial forum, or just any that benefits that you anticipate doing this with members?
It develops somewhat of a rapport with you and the member.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Janelle. Yeah, so building rapport, building a relationship. Yeah. Anyone else?
You know, I haven't done a psychosocial yet, but I do feel like it would probably assist in, you know, providing a level of transparency and like honesty.
Yeah.
Yes, rapport, honesty, yes, transparency. Thank you, Angela.
I do think there's oh,
Go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. I just started screaming. I do think it's helpful in like a workforce program too to have the opportunity to ask questions that maybe members, you know, weren't expecting to really get asked. I think this was mentioned, like just to show that there is care and there is like intention behind, you know, how folks are doing and that we want to dive into that too while they're here for, you know, even if it's for employment services. Just like developing like a caring kind of environment through the psychosocial.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
it also sets the tone or it sets the tone for trust, you know, because if I trust you enough to share these things with you, I also trust you enough to lead me into a career or employment, or, that I'm coming here for some purpose and you will, service a need that I have or support me in obtaining a goal or.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So trust, rapport, transparency. Yeah, these are all great things. You've all kind of already answered some of these. These are some other ones that I also wanted to point out. It provides a comprehensive, right? You may learn things that you would have never known before about
Mhm.
someone. So comprehensive understanding of, the individual that you're working with. Psychological, social, environmental factors that influence, how they're doing and their well-being. It improves communication about these topics, right? So you have this trust and you've had these types of hard conversations before. It allows you to continue that space, right? That trust where if these things come up again, they know that they have someone that they can talk to about these types of things. It supports relationship building with members, and it provides personalized care as opposed to like a one size fits all approach to things, and really taking the time. And I think Allison had also mentioned just like the care with the asking these things. It also, it might help you have a better idea on how to support this individual with aspects of developing the career plan. It also helps determine readiness or barriers for different job opportunities. And it outlines current supports for mental health needs, maybe the types of mental health need that is required. And it also you may kind of foresee or address once you've identified some barriers for different program engagement or careers or anything like that. So definitely you've mentioned a lot of these already, but I just wanted to point out some other things to kind of keep in mind. All right. So we'll jump into the different components and kind of talk about how each of them kind of feel for you all with implementing these and how to introduce these and what types of questions are in these different sections. So the first section, and as I mentioned in the chat, there is a PDF of it if you'd like to follow along to see what individual questions are in each section. So this first part is basic personal information. So here on the slide are the questions in part A of the psychosocial assessment. So it really just focuses on information about the individual, such as date of birth, languages spoken, sexual orientation, etc. So with this section in particular, you also want to explain why we're asking these types of questions. And you can say something along the lines of what's on the slide. So sometimes people's background may contribute to resilience or challenges. By background or identity, I mean the communities you belong to, the languages that you speak, where your family
Mhm.
is from, your race, ethnic background, gender, sexual orientation, etc. And always explaining why we ask these questions may be really helpful on how it's received by the individual. So you never just want to go through a list of questions and ask as you go. But as someone mentioned earlier, right, this is a conversation. So maybe you can say something along these lines, right, what's on the slide, and then you can be like, how does that sound to you? And if they say, okay, that makes sense, or if they have questions, right, answering some of those questions they have, and then kind of going into filling out some of that information. But definitely always one explaining why we ask certain things. The next part of the psychosocial assessment is asking about protective factors. So this can also include things like strengths or things that may help members navigate or cope with any ongoing stress that they have. So your forms that you all have will include a space to take notes on each of the different protective factors a member may have, such as sources of support, so important people in their lives, consistent home routines, a sense of belonging in their communities or in their homes, their positive beliefs that they have that really help them kind of keep them motivated or things like that, or any positive skills or characteristics that they may have. And the questions on the slides are some examples. pulled from a longer list of things that you all can ask about on your psychosocial forms. Then there's a section on stressors, and this asks members about different stressful situations or factors that they may be experiencing and the ways that they cope with these stressors. So first we ask more generally with, like on the slide, more open-ended questions about different potential stressors such as health, family, or work, and just different other domains of stress. Then there's a checklist on this section as well, which is shown here on the slide, to make sure we kind of check in about different other areas of stressors, just so we don't miss any things that a member might be going through. And while not shown on this slide, there's also another question after the checklist where you can add more detail or maybe other things that they mentioned that isn't already on here. But there's also an opportunity to ask, how long have you been experiencing this this stress or this stressor, and how severe it has been. So I'm really taking note on that because sometimes some things may not be as stressful for one person as opposed to another. So really gauging on not only is the stressor present, but how is that like for you? What has that been like? How has that impacted you? Asking some of those questions about these different stressors also goes a really long way. And as you can already tell by this list, we also ask a lot about the different social determinants of health in this section too. And we'll talk a little bit about, an example on asking about some of these stressors. So here we have an example on asking about housing insecurity. So before I share kind of like how we can ask this, I would love to hear from you all. How does it feel to ask about these stressors, or how might you ask your members about housing insecurity? It might be hard to think about, all the stressors. So let's focus on one. So maybe how might you ask someone about housing insecurity? How might you approach that?
Do you have secure, permanent and stable housing?
Okay, so do you have secure and permanent stable housing?
Grace, you want to chime in?
I mean, I often explain the program and I, tell them like, yes, we're here for jobs, but we also have this plus piece. So let me tell you a little bit about all the other services we have. And normally housing is one of the first things we talk about because, even when we're working with NYCHA residents, there's a large population of our residents who aren't on leases. And so this is always something we want to circle back to in the conversation of like, are you on the lease? Oh, you're not. Who are you living with? Is it grandma? And you kind of dive into it that way. But definitely starting with this is corny, and I think I stole this from Jose. So if he's on the call, he can call me out on it. But the plus part of Jobs Plus and really focusing in on that.
Yeah. I love what you both are saying too, is like, it is definitely conversational, even though, and I'm just going to go back on the slide here real quick, right? Just to show you, right? Even though you have this list of stressors, right? You're not going food insecurity check, you're not doing just a checklist down the line, right? But you're rewarding them and framing them in a way that seems conversational. So you're maybe, like Janelle was saying, right? Reframing the question, making it into a question, or as Angela was saying, right? Incorporating it into kind of the services that that you offer or resources. So that's a good way on going through asking about some of these things. So thank you all for sharing. Here are some other kind of ways you can ask things if going through this list, and you can adapt these to the different stressors, but we're just focusing on housing as an example for now. And you'll notice that with the first one, right, it's even normalizing some of it, right? It's been a really difficult year for a lot of people to make rent, or a lot of people have struggled with this. How has it been for you and your family? Is this something that you're struggling with right now? So normalizing some of these things can also be really helpful. Have you lived without a place of your own, or just rewording them to make it seem more conversational? Or how difficult has the housing issue that's been ongoing is like, it's really frustrating, hasn't made it for you to do your work and get along for other people. So other ways on how to incorporate this into a conversation. So the next section here asks, part D asks about mental health history. So we ask whether members have received mental health services in the past. And this is different from the mental health screening because the goal here is really to figure out past and current mental health care or barriers as well. So in this section, there's also a section on towards the end that asks more about barriers to care, such as transportation or costs or things like that. Again, which can inform some of the resources and ways that you can support them that you probably wouldn't have known before. So again, here are some examples of questions that you can ask about mental health and whether members have previously received care. So sometimes it can be hard to know if you saw a mental health provider, have you seen a therapist, counselor, doctor for mental health, or has anything prevented you from getting the help that you need? And members may or may not know if someone, saw a mental health professional. That looks very different for a lot of people. Maybe support was seen in a different way, and you can also write that down. But it can be helpful to clarify and ask more about it to include here as well. And then, as I mentioned, there's also a full checklist of barriers to share with members. And one way to introduce that topic is saying, has anything prevented you from getting the help that you need? And then the final section is section E, or part E, which is the service plan summary. So you'll wrap up the psychosocial assessment by listing your recommendations for the person that you just spoke with. And you have all this information, and you might see what are their strengths, what are some things that they could use support on to help inform that plan. So recommendations include stress management, counseling, referral to see a mental health clinician working with your organization, or to social services to address some of the social determinants of health. So I know Angela was mentioning, housing support as well, if that's something that you are able to provide. And then at the end of the forms, you can list any notes that you have about the services that you recommend. And then, although you have a more informed list and services that you'd like to provide, you may also have members who may be open to those recommendations and really excited about, the support that's being provided. But you also may have individuals who are less open or refusing some of those services. And it's for a variety of reasons. But there is a section where you can document that, the services that were offered and the services that were accepted, and maybe the services that for whatever reason, right, they're not wanting to take on those supports at this time. And then at the very end, there's a section to ask about government benefits member receiving, right? Maybe they already have support elsewhere, just opportunities to also ask for that. So going through kind of the components and the types of questions that we ask, how do you see, how can you use the psychosocial assessment to inform or to build your members' career plan? What are some things that would be helpful for that?
May I speak?
Of course, yes.
Yes, so the psychosocial assessment, I feel like can help with a member's career plan, because you could kind of intervine kind of like some of the questions that are in the assessment into the career plans, because the career plans do ask, I wouldn't say similar questions, but questions that forces participants to kind of like answer truthfully, answer in a way where they have to they have to kind of like create like a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, and ask some really deep questions where it opens up that line of communication between you and the participant, and it makes it a little bit more intimate. That way they can kind of feel more comfortable with you, right? And they can trust you, because trust is key when we're doing these assessments, right? Because they're asking some very like open-ended questions that are personal. So I feel like kind of like using that assessment to build a career plan, it then forces the member to dig a little deeper, to kind of like build, like really force them to really talk more and engage with you rather than kind of like fabricating some of the assessments, because some participants may just say whatever just to put something down on paper. But when they have that trust and they have a good rapport with you, they'll be more willing to open up.
Yeah, you mentioned so many good points. Thank you so much, Brian. And I see a few people unmuted and hands up. If you'd like to chime in.
Uh, could, could, could you hear me, Grace?
Yes, great.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to add that the psychosocial assessment to build the members' career plan. While you're having that conversation with them, with different aspects of the psychosocial, you could get to see the motivation that they have. What while we're discussing, I mean, what they want to do, you get to see if they're really motivated when they're talking about maybe a particular career, how motivated they are, because the motivation will let them take the opportunities that we could offer. So you get to see the motivation while doing the assessment, how excited they are with what that we are discussing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Grace. Yeah, so gauging a little more about on their motivation, different careers or jobs. Thank you.
We also, in combination with the other counseling services,
Mhm.
even the career assessment service would use that information to help our staff maybe understand how to identify and talk with and prepare members for things that are going to fit well with where they are now. So, we talk about all the time about the stressors that people might be going through. So, how does that feed into the kind of environment that we're referring them to so that they have a very positive work experience at the outset while they're building their resilience? So, I think that's an important part of that whole mental health part of our Jobs Plus program is making sure that we're using that information to their best interests in terms of education and employment.
Absolutely.
I don't
Yeah.
know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
I just wanted to add on top of what the gentleman said that one supersedes the other. Psychosocial assessment sort of supersede the starting in planning the career planning. So you have to complete the goals around your mental health needs in order then to be prepared uh, to do a career planning assessment. So that's my thought, that the psychosocial assessment and working on the goals for in mental health takes precedence before then working on career planning.
Yeah, and it can really support, right, setting them up for success, right, for career. So really incorporating, addressing some of the mental health needs can really also support, right, career and being able to do those jobs and the best way that they can, right, to their fullest potential. So this can really support. They go in hand for sure. Thank you.
Can I pencil in?
Yes, of course.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shade Smith. I am the retention specialist, and I feel as if that psychosocial assessment to build a career plan for a member is definitely needed because psychosocial is basically the interactive on how a person behaves and how they go through their individual lives. So if you can get a basic understanding on how they time management, whether or not they procrastinate, or what can make them feel like they can't overcome, or how they can set their goals and get through their goals. Because someone can say in 5 to 10 years they want to be a doctor, but if they don't have the mindset and the confidence and the skills to get to that 5 to 10 year goal, then they're just writing anything on a paper. So I feel like if we add in psychosocial assessment into their career plan, not only do we help them get the dream career that they want, but also we teach them life skills on getting to that goal. How that sound?
Yes, thank you all so much for sharing. This is super insightful and just a lot of ways and benefits that this can really help, both of these things support the member, right? They kind of do go hand in hand, they inform one another. But I'm definitely hearing a lot about how the psychosocial assessment can help almost improve that career plan and make it kind of more attainable and more a better fit for that individual. Thank you all.
I just had a quick question. In your opinion, and I guess and this is for everybody in the room because we're all, on this field, is there like a certain criteria or a certain thing people should look for before administering the cycle assessment? Is it a high PHQ-9 score is like the answer? Is it discretion of the clinical wellness coordinator or clinician? Is it anybody who comes into the wellness? I mean, I'm just curious, is there a criteria that other providers are using to determine when to utilize the psychosocial assessment?
I actually have a similar question and a comment. One of the things, so I mean, theoretically, we're sharing this information, and I recognize that a lot of people in this meeting are not clinicians in their organization. But one of the things that has been working in terms of getting members to share more personal information with me is assuring them that this information is not widely shared with the individuals that are making career, doing job placements and making referrals and that kind of stuff, because they're concerned about that. So, I mean, what we do then is act in an advisory capacity and say, maybe this kind of job and that kind of job, but we do not share the details of that very intimate conversation with the member. And so in line with what you're saying, I want to ask now, are we now getting HIPAAs? Are we now having a different kind of conversation, an information gathering process with our members? I need to know.
Yeah, and I can answer to just a few things here related to, you're both kind of asking similar but different questions. First, for Federica, this is really sensitive information, and with all sensitive information, including the psychosocial assessment, consent and confidentiality, or just, sharing, being transparent about how this information is used is really important. And so for the purposes of, your organization, you can be transparent about, this information is only shared with these people, whether that's just you or whether that's you and the person that's helping them with their career planning, but being really transparent and about who's receiving that information, and then checking in with that individual if that is okay. And if adjustments need to be made, then that's okay, but just being transparent about that information and how it's being used. And then I think for Jonathan, for the criteria on like who should we use the psychosocial form, technically, you could use this with anyone. If you can take pieces of it that would be helpful for you to use, but for implementation and here in general, it is, and Alessandra, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it is typically for any individual that scores higher, that meets criteria on the PHQ-9 to be able to use this psychosocial form. Alessandra, is that correct?
So we don't have a specific score criteria, but really the purpose of this was just because people had mentioned that the PHQ-9 was not telling the whole story of what members are going through. So this psychosocial assessment just kind of helps paint a clear picture of what members are experiencing.
Yeah, so you can use it for anyone.
Can I go?
Of course.
Hi everyone. My name is Chanel Lewis. I'm the clinician for Urban Upbound Astoria and Queensbridge. So the way how I implement my psychosocial, I do base it on high PHQ-9, but the only time the form is done in depth is if the member needs referral, whether to psychotherapist, therapist, or anything of that sort. That's when I implement my psychosocial and any other follow-up after.
Thank you, Chanel.
So then, thank you, Chanel, for that. Therefore, is that going to become the HRA standard? Will we get to choose when we do this? Or like, I'm trying to figure out how this is going to work programmatically in terms of our requirements.
Frederica, yeah, it's definitely optional. Of course,
Okay.
all members are not going to present high risk where we need to go in depth with a psychosocial. I am in line with Chanel's suggestion of how she operates her best practice. And if you have high scoring members and through your, I think that some clinicians have presented once they meet the member and they score high on the psychosocial and in that initial conversation, then to receive more information. The psychosocial is sorry, after the PHQ-9 is conducted, then to receive more information, they'll conduct the psychosocial assessment. So that is really the line of what I believe we're looking for. Not that it's not like to be used as the PHQ-9 is used. The PHQ-9 is an everyone assessment. Yeah, use your clinical discretion. And a part of this webinar is to teach everyone discretion in when to, and how to use the form. So no, this is not an all members form, but like Chanel said, if you have a high scoring member and you believe you are going to make a behavioral health resource service, even though this will assist in, again, those protective factors and those stress factors that are there to identify the needs of the member, and then you'll make the referrals based on that. But no, definitely not for every member. Definitely use all of your professional clinical discretion, please.
All right. Thanks, Chandrea. That helps a lot.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
that helps a lot. And like the pieces, the second portion of that is very helpful, I think, for our wellness unit, in terms of identifying other services like entitlements and work supports and things like that. The stuff about substance use and family history of violence and stuff like that, that gets into an area that people often don't want to talk about if all they want to do is come here, get a job, and move on. So thank you. That's very helpful.
I just wanted to say something. It's Grace.
Yes.
But the PHQ-9, sometimes they don't even have they might have one check mark where maybe several days. But it might be one item that we get to that I would ask, well, why is this one checked off several days? And that leads to the conversation about why. And then it goes on to other things. And then you get a whole psychosocial assessment from that PHQ that wasn't even asked about. So knowing how to use that psychosocial assessment is really key, because then you identify more things that are it's not necessarily on the PHQ-9 form, and it opens up the member to tell you, once you ask a question in a conversation, not digging out the life story, what happened, why they chose that answer instead of not at all. Then I get a lot of more info, because last week I had a young man that came in, and his PHQ-9 score wasn't high, but he did have a every other days, check off. And then I asked him, was it the job or what it was? And it was, then he opened up about his living situation, the kids needing a job, and it was just the stress and the support that he didn't have while he was pressing so hard to get employment. So after we talked about it, we talked how to manage the stress and what he could do. I says, well, you took a step coming in here. That's a first step to a positive to your goals of trying to get stability. So after the conversation, he said he was happy to have had that conversation because now he could realize more things about why he was experiencing what he was experiencing, and to show that it wasn't something chronic, but it was a short term based on this outcome for employment. So that's just my little addition to this.
And thank you for highlighting that, Grace, because I think many of you so eloquently highlighted, and Susanna did start off the session stating these are questions that you guys are already asking. These are situations and information that members are already providing to you in a conversational manner. So redundancy is going to occur because you're right. It looks like the career plan. A lot of, no, it doesn't look like it, but a lot of those questions are in the career plan. So that is information that we have that we can use as a strength, right? That helps us get to know our members. So if we do get a chance to review the intake packet and the career plan prior to them coming to the mental health staff, then that allows you to have even a quick overview of what is happening, what they're looking for, what insecurities that they are experiencing, what challenges, and then you can proceed with the form if need be. But the information is there. You have it. Of course, the career plan does not have the in-depth, substance abuse questions and things of that nature. Some of the answers you can get from the PHQ-9. A lot of it you can have in conversation. But I also think that in conversation, CWCs and clinicians with members, if you see that they may not have scored high on their PHQ-9, but in dialogue, it's seeming that there's just a high amount of stressors present, then I would personally take out the psychosocial assessment. So again, it'll empower me to differentiate where I can support the member and make an even list of what's dire, to what can be hold off, for lack of better words.
I wanted to add a little bit in addition to what I was saying, that the career planning is assessing job readiness, family composition, with then what is in the scope of what the member can do as a job, with their interests and skills and job readiness. And so the psychosocial assessment that is assessing mental health problems, if the person's mental health is not fit, how can the person be moved to career planning? And so in the program is set to provide all the services, but in retrospect, the psychosocial assessment should be done with the treatment having some effectiveness before then moving the member to career planning. In essence, what I'm saying is that it's almost like the member has to do the 4 weeks to the 6 weeks of the brief solution focused therapy first, and then move to career planning.
And Marnell, I think that we do have situations at your site and at others, like what I'm hearing is a comparison to um, initial onboarding and gauging where they are in terms of preparation for job readiness, and if the site is ready to propose said member going out on interviews. And then when through observation, assessments, and conversation into action, some members are found to just not be ready to proceed. So they basically go through the site's boot camp version of job readiness or job preparedness. No, is that
Yeah, that's correct.
following? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I was just going to add on to a little bit to what Chandrea said, in terms of using the psychosocial to help member build a career plan. I know from working with our members, sometimes there's some inconsistency with members either not attending their training or any ACI training of that sort. So sometimes we need to do the psychosocial assessment to kind of dive into what's really the issue to why the inconsistency of either attending your trainings or not showing up for your job interviews. So I've dealt with that situation in terms of helping out a member, getting them work ready.
Thank you for that. I also, I want to add to that. I mean, we use that as part of the flow, the foot traffic flow in for counseling and clinical support, is that the education specialist or the career development specialist will say, I've sent this person out on five, I've set this up for 5 times and the person has not attended the interviews or whatever. Then the next step is, well, can they come in to see me? So yeah, so that's definitely part of that whole counseling process, is what are they doing or what are they not doing to move forward? Is it a psychosocial dynamic that's getting in the way?
Yeah, thank you all so much. Just hearing about different ways that you're using the psychosocial assessment in different cases and at what point it's helpful and the types of individuals that this might really benefit them, especially following and developing a career plan. So I really appreciated hearing from all of you. Thank you so much. Anything else? And then also the next slide we have is a break, but anything else before we break for a few minutes? Okay, we'll have still opportunities to keep discussing. So thank you all so much for your engagement. We'll just take a quick 5-minute break and then we will come back at the 15-minute mark. Thank you all. We'll wait for everyone to just join back on and then we can continue. All right, so we have about 2 sections left, just quick tips going through the psychosocial assessment, and then we'll have an opportunity to practice introducing and kind of going through asking some of those questions and going about that with individuals. And so we'll kind of have an opportunity to practice that. All right, so going through now what you can do to make the assessment a more successful process and where it feels a little more comfortable. So this is, I'm going to go through some of this part a little quickly because it is mentioned in the training. As I mentioned, please review 4.5 if you'd like a refresher at any point on the psychosocial assessment. But there are some concerns that may come up for you when completing the psychosocial assessment with members. One is your level of comfort with asking these questions will vary. Some of you ask these questions all the time, types of questions, and some of you may not. So a helpful thing is really getting familiar with the contents of the psychosocial assessment and really using this opportunity in this space, right, to practice some of that discomfort and practice on why is it feeling a little uncomfortable, and how practice can really be helpful so that when you actually do work with the member, you kind of had a little bit of experience in your back pocket now. Um, Another thing is you may be worried that these questions will take a lot of time. And we talked through about how some of these questions you may already be asking. So we've tried to keep the assessment as brief as possible to address this concern, but definitely reviewing to see what information you already have to make it not feel so long. Another one is you may be concerned on how it could affect your relationship with the members. We've heard about a lot of benefits and things that how this can really help your relationship and that connection and kind of your ongoing work together. But there also might be situations where you might feel uncomfortable on how this can actually impact it negatively. But we also want to keep in mind on all of the benefits and reasons why these questions are so important. So kind of remembering that in order to kind of help you be able to ask some of these questions. It's almost like myth busting a little that this actually does have potential to really create a really great relationship and trust with that member. Some member factors to consider. Sharing information that may be seen as personal, like finances, can be really difficult. And members may feelings that might come up include maybe feeling ashamed, feeling judged to disclose some of this information. And in some cases, legal concerns or legal information, for example, such as immigration status or documentation status, may also feel challenging to share that information with someone that you don't have a relationship with, especially. And while many members appreciate others, they do appreciate also expecting having someone to listen and to bear witness to their struggles and how they're also related to a lot of the things that might be going on. And so really opening the door for having these type of conversations so that there is kind of ongoing support with this type of information. And you may encounter other barriers as well, but I think the common thread that we're making throughout today's webinar and throughout the discussions that we've had is that the foundation for these types of relationships and these types of conversations is really trust. So we'll talk a little bit about how we can ensure that we're building trust at the beginning and throughout the psychosocial assessment. So here are the 4 steps for building and maintaining that trust with that individual throughout this process. So first, we want to make sure we don't just jump in and start acting like this is a form, right? We want to introduce it in a way and being honest about what this form is and how it's helpful. You want to use non-judgmental and normalizing language. Like this isn't something, that I'm asking this because there might be ways that I can help, right? We're not asking this because we're nosy, right? We want to say that this is a really helpful tool and how this tool will be used. And you all already mentioned such amazing examples on how this has been helpful and how it can help members. And you can really use that and to kind of go through that introduction and explaining that to individuals. So you can provide a clear explanation on why you're asking these questions and how it'll be used. And it's also important to be transparent about confidentiality. So who will have access to this information and why, right? And also sharing that if you hear something that's unsafe, that, safety is at concern, that you may have to let someone know to keep that individual safe. And as discussed in Module 3 on trauma-informed care, we want to ask permission and we want to be transparent with all the decisions that we're making and throughout the process. So we want to share that power by respecting members' priorities and boundaries. If there is information that they don't want to answer, we could explain why we're asking in this information and how this can be helpful, but also respecting boundaries if individual does not want to share that information at that time. And while these 4 steps don't necessarily have to be in this order, I think these are just good things to kind of anchor on and remember throughout your process and throughout your relationship and conversations with members. So these, I'm just going to go through quickly. These are kind of some example language that you all can use with some of these parts. So really on how to broach the topic, so how to normalize things. So sometimes parts of people's lives, like their background, identity, health, or living situations, can support resilience or cause challenges. And then also example language on how you might explain why you're asking. So these are some things we already talked about briefly. So I'm going to go through this. And this is also still in Moodle training 4.5 if you ever need to revisit. Asking permission. So remembering throughout the process, throughout this conversation, and then also remembering confidentiality. Let's go through here. And then something to keep in mind, you know, at the end of the psychosocial assessment, some things to remember that, you know, this isn't just, you know, we're never going to revisit this again. But we also really want to, we understand that this is really hard, and this might be hard or easier for some individuals to answer these questions, but we really want to take the time and acknowledge, like, thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions. I know it's not always easy to talk about this stuff, but you did a really great job. And if any other issues come up or anything about what we talked about today comes up, I'm here to support you, right? We want this to be the door kind of left open, whether there's ongoing support. And that's the purpose of the psychosocial assessment. We don't want it to be kind of a form we fill out and then we don't look at it again, right? We want this to be an ongoing relationship builder. We want this to be something that informs career plans or informs your decisions around what to do next with a member and how to support them. Maybe later down the line, some of the information of the psychosocial form comes up. So we do want to leave this kind of door open when we actually finish completing some of the information. So we talked a little bit about this already, but if there's anything else that comes up about what are some other ways that can help members feel comfortable sharing during the psychosocial assessment? Is there anything that we haven't talked about already that you all can see as being something really helpful?
I would say be mindful of the like space you're engaging in. Like if it's a super busy office, that's probably not the best time to try to have this conversation. Or, you know, if you do have a, you know, space that is completely private that you can take someone to have that, that would probably be better than, you know, doing it in a common area.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angela. And that just like also made me think of, you know, like not only space, like a privacy, but also I sometimes wonder, you know, what state is that person in right now? Are they really stressed in that moment that something just happened? You know, the context, just really understanding the environment currently before conducting it. So I think that's some really helpful things to kind of keep in mind. Anything else that anyone can think of that can also be helpful to help them feel comfortable during the psychosocial assessment? So I'm hopeful that means that we talked about a lot of great things already. But just as a reminder, here are some other things. Spend time building rapport. Maybe talk about things like interests or things that you already know about this individual before jumping into kind of these types of topics. So talk about their day and their interest. The way that you're presenting this information, right? Showing really genuine interest and curiosity and friendliness, and really, again, reminding them that the purpose is that you have hopefully some things that you can provide them and help them with. You want to practice some of those skills talked about in previous training, such as being with. So showing that you're actively listening, validating their experiences, their feelings, the things that they're sharing with you and affirming them, and normalizing as well. Explaining confidentiality, and again, as always, explaining the purpose of the psychosocial assessment and kind of the process. So from beginning to end, and then how you're going to keep continuing to use it to help support them. All right. So today we're going to practice with Jamal as a case example on using the psychosocial assessment. So here is our case example. So Jamal is a 26-year-old heterosexual African-American man living with his grandmother in East Harlem. Recently, his grandmother became ill and was hospitalized due to complications from lupus. Since his grandmother's hospitalization, Jamal has been searching for a full-time job to assist with paying her hospital bills. He has noticed himself feeling more nervous, jittery, and worried than usual, particularly when he thinks about his grandmother's health and their financial concerns, and is interested in learning more about mental health services. All right, so we will take about 15 minutes in a breakout room where you have an opportunity to role play with Jamal. So in your breakout rooms, I highly suggest having the PDF of the psychosocial form if you're not familiar with it, if you wanted to practice asking certain things on there to Jamal. So as I mentioned, that's in the chat. And if Alessandra, if you can put that in the chat again now for folks who didn't get a chance to see it. So I recommend looking at the psychosocial section on that. And then in your breakout rooms, you can decide who wants to play Jamal and then who wants to play kind of the person administering the psychosocial assessment. And then that individual can practice introducing it. Like, how might you broach the topic about this assessment, and how might you ask certain sections of it? And I'll leave it up to you about, which sections to ask. Maybe I definitely challenge you to choose maybe the ones that feel less uncomfortable, or sorry, yeah, less comfortable, so that you can have practice doing that, so that when you actually ask someone, you kind of have a little more experience and practice being able to do that. So, are there any questions about the breakout rooms and what to do in the breakout rooms? Okay, so you'll be in breakout rooms about like 3 to 4 people. So y'all can rotate and decide, if you want different people practicing giving the psychosocial assessment, and then we'll come back as a larger group and we'll wrap things up at the end. So you should get an invitation for a breakout room shortly. Is there anyone on here who did not get a breakout room invitation, so we can set that up if you need help? Alessandra, can you actually move Chanel to a different room since she's the only one in that one?
Sure.
Awesome.
Hi, Alessandra or Susanna.
Yeah.
So no one in my group other than me downloaded the form from the chat. And of course, when we're in the breakout room, you can't get the form from the chat. And I can't share with them to see. And it would totally defeat the purpose of the activity if I am the CWC.
Yeah, no worries. I'll jump in and share it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandra.
And I think I got to go back in now.
Okay, let me see now.
Did everyone get the implementation forms?
Yes.
No one has it actually.
Okay, wait.
Somebody
Wait,
has it?
let me see for a minute. Let me see. I said it. Let me see.
All right, I'm back.
No, because she was just sitting there and I had saved it. When the hell is that?
All right, guys. So Alessandra is going to drop the implementation forms in this chat, and then I will ask everyone to open it up so we can proceed with the activity.
Yeah, I shared it. Did everyone get it?
Um, yeah, I think I got it. Okay, good.
Implement form. I see implement form.
Yeah.
Implementation form. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, and the
And now they
psychosocial
came
assessment
up.
is in there.
Okay.
So go to the psychosocial assessment, psychosocial intake form. And now that you guys have this full packet downloaded, I would suggest to save it. It's going to start out with all of the forms. We're going to A3. A3. Scroll down to A3, psychosocial intake. It's right after the risk assessment.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Marangela, you have it up?
I have it up, yeah.
All right, you ready to role play with Ranzel?
Hold on. Yeah.
I'm going to go through the rooms, Alessandra, just to see if there's any questions.
Okay, thanks.
Just waiting for anyone else in breakout rooms. I think this is everyone. Okay, so we can continue. So you all had the opportunity to practice asking Jamal some more questions, kind of try to incorporating the psychosocial assessment. And so I'd love to kind of hear from you all. What's something that went well during the role play? What's something that surprised you? What went well? Would anyone like to share something from their group?
So yes, my group, I played Jamal in my group, and Frederica played the counselor. And first of all, I just want to say she did an amazing job assessing and just kind of getting Jamal through some of his thoughts around, what his needs are, and assessing, what's happening with his grandmother, and really also assessing, what his needs might be in the future. And so through her questioning and her reflections, and so I think what went well in our role play was that, the line of questioning was very much a conversation. I didn't feel like Frederica was reading necessarily, quote unquote, off of the psychosocial, but she was basically prompt from my responses. And I think that's what made and could make real life situations potentially beneficial, in gathering information. Just, yeah, I'll leave it there.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Shamika, and Frederica,
Mhm.
to you for making it conversational. And I'm sure you made Jamal very comfortable. Thank you. Anyone else? Anything else that went well in your groups? Hearing from like one other person, maybe?
In our group, this is Kevin Stone with Jobs Plus. I think the interviewer did very well with asking questions and showing reflective listening, to make sure that they're both on the same page.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So active listening, feeling engaged. These are great things to help make members feel a little more comfortable during this process. Thank you. Amazing. Thank you all for your engagement and participation. I'd also love to ask, what was challenging going through it? Some of you may have already gone through it before. Maybe others, this was your first time. But regardless your experience with this, how did it go in the role play practicing with peers? What was challenging during the role play or asking these questions? And this is a question for anyone to answer.
Well, I would say, part of the challenge was we all felt like we needed to see the case study again. I think that there were a lot of pieces to the puzzle that we may have missed when we read through it the first time. And so just hoping to have had that better snapshot of his full story or his background, I think, was part of the challenge in regards to the role play.
Yeah, thank you, Shamika. So maybe having you all have maybe like the excerpt in either the chat or maybe a PDF or something so you have on hand. Yeah, to get those important pieces of information. Thank you, Shamika. Anyone else? Any other challenges adding on to that or just in general about the psychosocial assessment?
I was taken out of the video training. My computer was frozen for a little bit of a time. But on this scenario, on a generalization base, we would not have known of the case of the client before doing the psychosocial, right? The member comes in, is registering, and they may have a high score on their PHQ-9, but they're just saying they're looking for training and employment in security. And so then we start the psychosocial assessment, right? Do we know from an initial phase that the client is saying, this is my grandmother is in the hospital, I'm stressed about that, and I'm looking for employment?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Marnell. Yeah, so you all might have different levels of information that you have on that person. So you're describing, right, when you're starting the psychosocial, you might not have any information about this person, and you're all you know is this person's name is Jamal, maybe, right? And so these role plays are, we provide information if maybe you have access to some of this information already, but yes, you could have gone through it as if also like you had no information about it as well, and maybe asking about some types of stressors. So there are varying levels of information that you might have before conducting this psychosocial. So maybe for the purposes of a role play, and it sounds like for you all, and I'd love for others to chime in, at the point of the psychosocial assessment, is it typically where you have really not even any information about this person at all?
I'm going to respond to that because it kind of leads into a comment that I was going to make, which often, I mean, people don't normally come to Jobs Plus to say their grandmother's sick and in the hospital and they have to pay bills. They might come in to say they need a job. And in the process of talking with them, whoever, then we identify that, well, they're really feeling stressed because their social support or a family member is, you know, sick or in the hospital or whatever. So I agree with Marnell. We don't know when somebody's coming in, not typically. That being said, I think for me, who was the interviewer, I might have ordered the conversation a little bit differently from the way the psychosocial is structured. Because I kind of like to identify the way we're going to meet the immediate needs of the member first. Like, I'd like to give them the satisfaction of knowing we're going to help you with that. We've got services, we've got referrals, or we can't help you directly with that, but I can certainly provide you a referral that goes. So I would have asked on the outset, what brings you here now looking for full-time work versus the part-time work that you have? Did something change in your life, right? And then that would lead me into the conversation about, well, let's take a look at the problem or the issue that you're identifying. And then let's talk about the rest of that stuff. What are you doing for yourself now? How are you getting through it? So I think I would have flipped it, you know, flip the conversation pieces so that it worked in a way that got to the client's identified need first and then went through all of the other stuff that we're beginning to collect. Who else is there for you, et cetera, et cetera. Just a thought, just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful tip, Frederica. And also there, as I mentioned earlier, it's a structured way and a guide, but by no means is it meant to be followed in that way only. It's definitely meant to be flexible to fit not only your style, right, your conversational style, but also the needs of that individual. So maybe there are some things you want to get to first, or maybe things that you think will be easier to answer first that will help you maybe build rapport and help you get to those other things on those psychosocial forms. And that might vary by each individual you see. And so really, I really want to emphasize that it's definitely meant to use flexibly as well. Thank you. Anyone else sharing about what went well or what was challenging about the role play or the psychosocial assessment? Any last thoughts before we wrap up for the day? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for your engagement. Before we end, we do have a quick mindfulness meditation practice just to kind of wrap things up and take a pause from whatever the day brought and just taking a moment for yourself. So I invite you, if you'd like, to join on this meditation practice. So I will guide you in this shortly. So for this moment, I would like you to just take a moment to get settled here in your room, in whatever room that you're in the chair that you're sitting. And I'd like to turn your attention to the sensations and feelings that you have in your body and any emotions that you may have. I invite you to take a moment to check in with your feelings and take a deep breath in and let it go. Now I invite you to bring particular attention to the feeling of your breath, or pay attention to something in your body. As you bring your shoulders down and orient your attention toward gratitude. Next, I invite you to bring to mind a sight, so something that you see that you are grateful for. Move through your senses and find one thing to start with that you appreciate that comes to you from the world of sight. It could be a color, a shadow, a shape, or a movement. What do you see right now? And can you feel grateful that you get to see this and have the sense? Now shift to a scent, so something you smell that you appreciate. As you continue to work through your senses, take time to tune in with appreciation to an aroma that comes to mind. What do you notice? What about that glorious or interesting or subtle smell is making you smile? It could be gratitude for something familiar, like a scent that brings you comfort or makes you feel uplifted. Or maybe it's something you've never smelled before and it just piques your curiosity. I invite you to move into our next sense, which is the sense of sound. Tune in to any sound around you, allowing the world of sound to gently exist in the background. Shift your attention to your ears and the world of sound. Maybe notice what it feels like to really listen, how many sounds you can notice, and how you feel grateful that you're able to experience sound. What can you notice about these sounds? Far away, close? Perhaps you could play a piece of music that brings you joy. Lastly, the sense of texture and touch. We find so much to be grateful for in touch. If there's someone close to you whose hug or embrace makes you smile, notice how this makes you feel filled with gratitude for the joy of human contact. Let your senses ignite your gratitude. As this practice comes to an end, carry this attitude of gratitude with you, noticing always what you feel and allowing yourself to be grateful that all that talent went into making your life a little easier. Noticing your senses throughout your day, grounding on your breath and grounding on your senses. And when you're ready, you can come back to today's webinar and we can wrap up. And thank you for participating in that mindfulness exercise with me.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was
All so much. We are done for today. If there are any questions, I will hang around in the waiting area here with Alessandra. But if you have to go, please enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you all for your participation.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you
Bye,
so much.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.